Hello, everybody listening live on YouTube and live on Twitch. Thanks for joining us. Guys, I had him on maybe about a week and a half ago, and he was a huge hit and success. This is my nephew, Gre Miller, who I have said, I told you guys, this man is a genius. This man has a mind that goes so deep. It is often beyond even our realm of understanding. Now, Greg, you got to understand, and I know you understand this, bro, because you sent me a message and you told me about this, bro. Conversations like this usually disappear from YouTube.
Sure.
But you mentioned you can dance around things, bro, so we can get this out there. Correct?
I think so. Honestly, yeah. It's possible. It is possible.
That is unbelievable to me, Greg, starting there. The censorship on social media just blows my mind. When people have a different way of seeing things, a different idea, and all of a sudden videos disappear, comments disappear. They are no, and I'm not talking about anything, laced with profanity or anything like that. I'm talking about ideas, conspiracy, a critical way of thinking. Bro, those thoughts, they're there 1 minute, they're gone the next. Now, if that's not censorship, and if that's not certain people wanting you to believe and see things a certain way with the rest of the flock, what else could it be, Greg? Like what else would it be for somebody to do a YouTube video with a conspiracy and the next day it's not there? What else? How else do you explain that?
It's counter narrative. That's the term that comes to mind. Anything that's against the orthodoxy of the moment, especially considering everything is so heavily politicized right now. You see the justifications too, ultimately, and comes down to, I don't know if they're trying to call things hate speech or if they're trying to say it just generally violated terms of service, because I think they were pulling stuff down that was going against the WHO recommendations, things like that. It's so vague. And I don't know if you've seen recently, there's been this mass exodus from Twitter to an app called Parler, which I'm currently a part of. I was never a part of Twitter because I feel like I saw this years ago that I didn't want to be part of this cesspool, and I kind of was seeing how big it was getting, and clearly this isn't going to turn out well. It's neat to see this other platform arise, and clearly a lot of conservative minds have been the ones to leave Twitter because they've been the ones ultimately highly censored lately. And
but Greg, is now I've not heard of Paula before. I'm going to check it out after the show. But bro, is the same thing going to happen?
It's entirely possible, but at the very least, it's come in at a pretty opportune time, I think. It's at least a platform for the moment. I get the sense it's at least built with the notion that it's not going to maybe take on sponsorship in the same way. So maybe it's not going to be subject to the same types of regulations that ad space platforms are.
So. Greg, is the fear just that people will have a mind of their own? People will have their own thoughts. I mean, otherwise, what are you afraid? Like, why are you taking this video down? What is the fear other than people will start thinking for themselves?
Well, if we're getting real shallow with it, I don't know if you're familiar with Project Veritas or this guy James O'Keefe.
I'm not.
Pretty vilified, but this is a guy he's kind of the yellow journalist of our time, sort of a muckraker of sorts. So he has done a lot of hidden camera, kind of gotcha types of investigations that are frankly very necessary a lot of times. The most recent one was a couple of whistleblowers from Facebook who themselves are conservative white males and who were seeing clearly content moderators were being incredibly biased toward removing anything that was conservative or Trump related, and they clearly had a problem with it. This is entirely the problem. I don't personally stand with any particular political party. I value critical thinking, and I do not value the bias that seems like it is taking place on Facebook. It's not anything anybody would want to see, regardless of what your political stance is. They are they're clearly interfering with the flow of information on that platform. And to see the hidden camera footage I don't think anyone's that shocked to see it. I think we kind of all had the sense something like that must be happening. So the most shallow version of this is that there are people in power that want to remain in power or want to gain more power in terms of their political stance in this country, and whatever business interests are behind them. It's an incredible, powerful platform that we're on right now. I mean, these are the types of things that change minds and get people voting in certain directions and get people in mass mobs, tearing down statues and burning buildings and things like that.
Yeah. Well, Greg, I know I got a message from you this week, because it seems like every week, like Greg is in some kind of a rabbit hole, and then you'll text me, and I'm like, the only way I will understand what the hell he's talking about is to bring him on the show and let Greg explain. So, bro, there were a couple of hot buttons. And, bro, as soon as I get your message, I have to call Bin Hameen of the Conspiracy Horsemen, and he's got to break it down. First of all, the first thing he does is laugh, because he knows exactly what you're talking about. Then he's got to break it down in Vince Russo terms, so I know what you're talking about. But you seem to have a couple of hot buttons this week, Greg. What's on your mind this week, man?
Oh, man.
Now, Greg, we again, bro, we want this video to stay on.
Yeah, no, of course. Listen, this is one of my main messages here is to come from a place of compassion, because if there's anything to say about this time, it's that there's probably never been more confusion. Right. So if there's somebody out there that has a different viewpoint than you and is angry about it and angry about the way that you think, if you can't see from a place of compassion first, we'll never make progress here. So really, none of this comes from any sort of a vile place or anything like that. This all comes from the necessity of understanding.
And this is from a man. Let me verify this. This is from a man who raises chickens.
Yeah.
So a man that raises chickens, you've got to be coming from a place of compassion. But and I believe that, Greg. You're all about compassion. I think people see that with your presentation. I mean, you're no Alex Jones, bro. So go ahead, Greg. I know you were on to a couple things this week. What's happening?
Man, I mean, all right, if I'm going to put it into one big statement so that I don't kind of get off track, so that you guys know why I'm here. This is kind of all about this rise in woke culture. I think is probably the best general term that I can give it. You've seen different terms kind of surrounding it. We have a movement right now called Black Lives Matter that is kind of very much rooted in this type of culture, woke culture. We've got the point I want to get to is a lot of people using some of the terminology. A lot of the people who are abiding by this ideology don't really seem to understand that it is an ideology. It actually has a name. It's been studied in academia, and it's at least like 30, 40 years old now. Gosh, it must be about 40, 50 years old now at this point. It's a mode of thinking. It's something that is codified. It's written down somewhere, which is kind of why I think it's strangely consistent in its use of some of these terms, and why a lot of us seem to be confused that we have two different definitions of things. So my purpose here is to kind of try to break down a little bit. I mean, and you have to keep in mind there's a breadth of knowledge out there. I'll try to leave your audience with some links by the time I'm done, so that you can kind of look some of this stuff up yourself. But the importance of this to me is that people know what they're dealing with, so that you know how to counter it, so that you know how to fight it. Because frankly, one of the problems I think we're seeing is that people are bending the knee to it without understanding what it is. And that's not the way that you deal with it. That's not the way that you're going to see it go away. And the reason I forget how much I've been inundated in this stuff. So I kind of feel like I got to give a small disclaimer about me, because I'm going to be here as a white guy talking about Black Lives Matter, and not necessarily in the best terms. I mean, I was raised in a family that was very clear-headed about justice and about racism and about the fact that there are many of us coming from many different places. And my wife is a person of color. I'm not sure she would appreciate me calling her that, but I have to stress that when I criticize these things, or when I try to tell you to take a second look at them, this isn't coming from a place of any sort of like supremacy or anything like that. It really isn't. It's to me, this is very much about the assault on Enlightenment values and common sense logic. Really, I talked about it last time. The trivium is something I hold very near and dear, because it's the only way to come to any sense of truth, is to have a consistent methodology that can actually lead you to something meaningful. Mm-hmm. So all that being said, the core principle here, I feel like that helps, that would help anybody kind of sort through this, is the difference between, I don't know if you've ever gotten into an argument about what you can or cannot know with anybody. This might be something I could see getting into an argument with Vij about this stuff, maybe at least years ago.
Right.
Because this is an old philosophical kind of back and forth, that you can either trust your five senses and say that the world around you is trustworthy to the extent that it can be measured. You can predict things about it. If I jump off a cliff, gravity doesn't care if I believe in gravity. It's gonna, I'll plummet to the earth. That's how, laws of physics work, so to speak. So the idea that there's this old school, you might even hear it called the liberal method, or I've called it the trivium method. There's this old school way of learning. Aristotle was very big on it. Aristotelian logic is something you can kind of look up, encounter to these things. So this old method, this kind of very trustworthy, very classical method of learning about the world around you, and the fact that, you and I can talk about, the size and shape of something and agree on it, that you're not going to try to argue with me that, oh, that's just the way you see the world. And how do I know that you're seeing the same color I'm seeing? At some point, you got to agree on the axiom that reality exists. It's there. If we're in a simulation, whatever, it's a pretty consistent simulation. But that's another one of these weird postmodern ideas that you see pop up, is that people think you're in a simulation, and none of this is trustworthy. I really enjoyed Ayn Rand as an author. I realize, again, as an author, she tends to be very vilified, but she wrote extensively about this, because I think she was from Russia, coming out of a communist throwover. She saw her family's farm taken over, and I think that was very much she saw America very much as like the land of individualism, and the whole body of objectivism that grew out of her work really is just kind of more of the same idea, that you have to trust the world around you. If you start succumbing to this idea that you can't trust what's around you, and that reality isn't real, you very quickly start to fall victim, I think, to some pretty nasty ideas. So we've got this old school method now. In the past 100 years or so, a new sort of philosophical, it's been longer, man. You could trace these ideas very far back, I think. Immanuel Kant is another philosopher, very famous. His big work was the Critique of Pure Reason. And I think that was kind of the beginning of somebody trying to tell you that you can't trust, you don't really know anything. You can't really come to know anything. And the thing is, on a philosophical level, yeah, you can argue that stuff into the ground. And this is the point of having an axiom. Like, we have to agree on a ground floor. We have to say reality is real, because we have to be able to talk about it in real terms, so that we can, make predictions and fix things if there are problems. Postmodern thought, postmodernism, I think has probably been most seen in art, like the Dadaist movement. There's been anything kind of that was rejecting classicism, or classical, or impressionist. There's kind of this very absurd kind of art movement that starts to grow, and the body of thought that Black Lives Matter and this whole woke movement is rooted in this academic theory that they call critical theory. And there's a whole bunch of them. So there's critical social justice theory, critical feminist theory, critical race theory. The critical theories are, I mean, even to call them a theory is really it's really a misnomer. They're frameworks of interpreting the world. They aren't based on data. They're sort of forays into possible. It's really, I'm telling you, this is a difficult thing to explain, because postmodernism, it doesn't really adhere to anything. That's kind of the point. It changes its mind all the time, and it might change definitions on you, because it doesn't matter, because it doesn't see anything as being absolute. Everything is relative all the time. So it kind of gets difficult to pin this down. the real tell-all, or the real telltale sign of these critical theories, is their circular logic. That if you're coming from the classical method, if you're trying to argue with somebody and you're trying to be generous with your, you want to have a good faith argument, you're trying to maybe give them some leeway so that you can get the conversation started, or whatever. There's this undeniable ability to just fall back on, the classic one right now is if you ask for data, or if you ask me to explain myself anymore, you're racist, or you're necessarily, you don't get it. That's really the critical, that's where you're going to see this. This is somebody who doesn't understand, they're spouting this theory. I mean, even the ones, because you have to appreciate there are severe or serious academics that are talking about this stuff and have been talking about this stuff for years. And the unfortunate part of this is that it's made its way into educational institutions. Teachers learn this stuff and then they teach other teachers. So I think this is why we're kind of seeing this weird, like, sleeper cell kind of, like, they're popping up everywhere and everyone's getting fired because they had no idea the rules had just changed all of a sudden, because this is this weird academic theory that's just kind of been very pervasive. So I realize I'm still being really vague here. The critical theories, man, because again, they're just incredibly vague. You've already been hearing a lot of the big themes. So this idea of power and oppression and the oppressed, and that your experience trumps the objective truth about the world, so that the lived experience, right? I mean, again, like, you'll hear these terms kind of parroted all the time. You're going to see constantly that everything is problematic, and problematic basically means that it offends somebody for some reason. So all these problematic television shows right now, I think there were parts of Gone with the Wind recently that were problematic. This again is rooted in there's a fallacy called presentism. So if you're an historian and you're looking back at slavery in the United States, a great example, because that's kind of what we're talking about now. It's what we're still sort of dealing with. As an historian, if you're really going to get a sense of what was actually going on, and you're really going to try to tell the best story of what that time in history was like, the presentism fallacy is something you have to avoid at all costs. And it is one of the things they train historians on. It is essentially that you cannot apply the moral standards of your day to the past, because it just wasn't your day. You don't, that's kind of the reason you're investigating it. You're trying to elucidate a little bit more of why things were the way they were, without having to interpret it through a lens that says it was good or bad for nowadays. And so that is a rampant fallacy right now, right? That we're looking at history, we're looking at statues. And again, like, I'm not going to stand, or I'll stand for, I think history should be preserved. So whether or not it's a statue, I can understand, again, some of the, this is the weird part of this, man. Like, systemic racism is another one of these terms. There's probably very easily some things we can point to and actually run data on and say, yeah, we've got some systemic problems, and we can fix those things. And that's the beauty of data. That's the beauty of having this classical method, that we can actually pinpoint what the hell's going on. So there are things like a great example, I think, is driving while black. That's a really good example. And I mean, having black friends myself, this is universally something they've dealt with at least one time in their life. And I've had my run-ins with police. I don't know if you ever heard that story. That's for another time. Mm-hmm. But I have some insights on that as well. But there are some unusual things like that, right? There are housing legislation that can probably change. There are definitely things we can look at that are very objective and that have a solution. Because the problem with a lot of these proposals of systemic racism now is that there is no fixing it. The way critical theories work is that they frame the entire world in this way that simply cannot be fixed. It's kind of a giant complaint, if I'm being honest. It wants, and in fact, if you really dig into the literature, really it seeks to flip the oppressed into the oppressors, and the oppressors into the oppressed. And, so I've talked to friends about this, and it's impossible to talk about this without them saying, oh, you were just worried that racism is going to be reversed. I'm worried about racism in general, man. I mean, the color of your skin has nothing to do with the content of your character. I guess I thought this was something that we established. I didn't know it was still. So again, I don't want to be ignorant about the fact that people go through some things. But I also think that we're in a pretty amazing country. I mean, you and I are, I'm second, third generation Italian immigrants. My wife's family, she's first generation immigrant. There's I don't know. I mean, there's success to be had. There are people who really have made their ways, and that is another one of the things that's a real shame about this. There are Black academics and people who have worked very hard for what they have, and now there's this weird movement that's trying to tell them that they are oppressed and that somehow they didn't work to get what they've got. And of course, I mean, there are people who they've got their tough times, and they're of all races. That's the thing. And if we're going to look at poverty as a problem, and maybe illiteracy and things like that, violent crime, I mean, those are all things that tend to be linked and really have very little to do with the color of your skin. So there are objective things we can actually talk about that we can actually fix. But critical theory and the way that it's kind of emotionally driven, and the fact that it doesn't really want to look for an answer. The answer is to just flip the whole thing, and it doesn't even have a built-in replacement for any of it. It kind of stops at burning it all down. It kind of stops at there must be a revolution. And again, I just think that's an incredibly dangerous mode of thought because, again, I'm all for changing things that need to be changed. I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater. We've got a lot of pretty good infrastructure. There are things that definitely work.
Greg, what you're basically saying is there's no plan, there's no end game, there's no goal.
That's as far as I can tell. No, in the academic circles, it's revolution. It's supposed to be that that power is shifted. But this is I mean, it's kind of hysterical, man. Because honestly, you and I are speaking through this medium right now. These computers, the internet. This is the pinnacle of what logic has done for us, is bring us machines that are reliable enough to do things like this. Mm-hmm. That's, if you were to throw that out and you expect to continue on with society and an advanced society, you will by necessity eventually have to rediscover the same principles. This is the only way we've ever gotten here. So if you're going to throw out logic, you're going to have to rediscover it if you're going to survive. So that's the problem here, is that this is just an academic theory. This was something I think it was developed as a legal framework. It sought to look at legal cases and see if there was disparity in legal cases, but it's just a framework. It's not an actual first principles way of interpreting the world around you. It's just kind of, honestly, it grows out of this very nihilistic idea too, that like everything is just, that there is no fixing anything and everything is just fucked. And that's a really, I don't get on board with that. I mean, I understand nihilism, but.
So Greg, where does it go? I mean, if that is the basis of it, it sounds like it's infinity and just keeps going and going. I mean, if there's no end game, like what is the goal? Where is the satisfaction? I mean, where is it? When does it end?
That's why I'm so frightened by this, and that's why I'm here talking to you, because this feels like a battle that has probably been going on for a long time. This feels like the eternal battle. This is I talked a little bit last time, so okay, this is incredibly relevant to you actually. I think some of the first institutions that had to deal with critical theories were churches. Because pastors they're accepting, they might hear that there's this new idea that a team leader wants to implement, and maybe they have poverty in their community. They will very quickly start to see that when you I've left out a key term of intersectionality. When you start to look at the groups that you belong to, and whether that means it's gay or trans or black or Hispanic or any of the number of worldly groups, the kind of idolatry that maybe is part of scripture, you start looking at things that don't really have anything to do with your soul and your character. They're necessarily contradictory to Christianity, because your relationship with God and your salvation and sin, and those are all very personal things. They have nothing to do with the group around you. You may be part of a church, and maybe the group is something that helps you develop your relationship with God, but you don't put a group really before your relationship with God. It doesn't, God doesn't care what color you are. The idea of being made in the image of God is that the worldly things about you are not the important things. That you have a soul that is the thing that is the spirit, that is the thing that is eternal, that will go on, and that is connected to God and will always be. So I think churches were some of the first institutions that have to deal with this, and it tears communities apart, because it it's combative because it puts some people in a place of victim. And then there's this whole idea of competitive victimhood where, you're going to try to say, well, I'm oppressed for this reason. And then this guy's going to counter with, well, I'm oppressed for this reason and this reason. And this is intersectionality as a term that, you might be gay, but you might be a white male. So you've only got one intersectionality point or one oppressed point. You might be gay and black and male. And now you've got two oppressed points. You might be gay and black and trans. And now you've got three oppressed points. So, and I mean, this could go on, man. And these are some of the arguments you'll see about it is, I know some pretty short people that want to be taller. And, I don't know if they're oppressed as shorter people in the world, probably. So these become some of the issues that these are just not important distinctions, really. Of course, I think we're all interested in making sure that everyone has opportunity when they do have something that they want to do. I mean, capitalism allows for this too. We would like to see people have the opportunity to do things that we don't want somebody who can be inventing the next great thing to be scrubbing toilets. We want to know that there's opportunity for people who need it. But many issues with this clearly. So there is some kind of eternal element to this to me. So that whatever is next, I think one of the really difficult things about this is that it's very infectious as an ideology. And I think this is why, if you're not really looking into it, on its face, it all sounds good. It sounds like social justice, as it's been said, because there's people who aren't getting a fair shake. And, we're protesting, we're making sure that they can get their fair shake. But, clearly you're seeing that it's devolving into craziness because there's not really a leader in the movement necessarily. There's not really, proposals of changes in legislation. They want to make big sweeping changes like defunding the police, which is just the worst idea that you could possibly have, when especially like some of these more oppressed communities, if that's what we're going to call them, probably need the police more than anybody. So there's just a lot of really contradictory ideas that float around this thing. And if you're not looking at it close enough, you're going to just take it on its face and you're going to think that it's fine. And you're not going to realize for a while that you're kind of on the outskirts of a cult a little bit. It's basically a religious doctrine at its core, because it doesn't allow for debate. It doesn't allow for argument. It kind of comes down to dogma. Like, it's just something you're either supposed to accept or you're not with us and you're against us. So there's really no winning. There's traps all over the thing. They call it, Kafka traps is something you might read about it. That you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, kind of a thing. Like you're racist whether or not you accept that you're racist, sort of an idea. I don't know what the end of this is supposed to look like. The real troubling thing to me is that there are plenty of good-hearted people who don't know what this thing is, know there's something wrong about it, but they can't quite put their finger on it, and they don't know how to stand up to it. And I think that's more the biggest reason I'm here, is to help anyone that's watching and has an interest in standing up to this thing. I want to encourage you first to learn as much about it as you can, because education is the way out of darkness, always, to understand, especially if it's somebody that you consider to be, your opposition. You have to understand where they're coming from enough to see how to try to get them on the right path. God, I hate to use that term, but it's true, man. I mean, it's such a scary path to go down in your mind, because you just eventually have to accept things that are clearly contradictory. In Wisconsin, not too long ago, here's a great example. There was I think a congressman, who was an openly gay congressman, and he was beat up by BLM activists at one of these statue protests. And I saw some Facebook posts of well-meaning people who were behind the movement up until this point, and then they're kind of writing like, "Hey guys, don't lose the message here. What's going on? Why would you do this? And he's openly gay. Like, isn't this something we're trying to fight?" The thing he has failed to see is that he's gay and he's a white male. And if you're going to go by critical theory, he's only got one oppressed point. So he's still worth less than. And it's incredibly frightening to see that kind of thing happen, no matter what your skin color. That is this horrible animal part of us that we've been trying to fight, I think, since the beginning, man. So I started mentioning to you at the beginning of the show, I found this incredible radio address by Bishop Fulton Sheen from 1947. He's a bishop of the Catholic Church. He has this amazing address about the Antichrist. And you really have to appreciate how these guys, I mean, they were very well educated. I mean, he clearly understands that he's not going to, you know, if this idea of the Antichrist, he's not going to be dressed in red. He's not going to be vomiting sulfur. He's not going to have a pointy tail. He's not going to have horns. He's not going to call himself the Antichrist because he would never have followers. He's going to be of the world, and he's going to be very much about proving to you that there is no heaven, there is no hell, there is no good, there is no evil, there is no difference. This is pragmatism. This is postmodern thought. This is if we're going to consider Christianity to be a pro-individual freedom religion, which I think I would very much, you know, and trust me, I understand, like, many horrible things have been done in the name of religion, but like if you can look at the doctrine enough just on its own, it's very much about your individual salvation. That is the word I'm trying to find. And it stresses that you do the work, you know, that if there's shortcomings in your life, that it's on you, that you can't blame the rest of the world for things that are happening, that there are things you're supposed to take, you know, responsibility for. And again, like I have Black friends that this was like a message that was handed down to them from their grandparents, man. Like, get out of this, you know, like, do the work, like, don't fall victim to thinking that everyone's out to get you. And I mean, really, I have a lot of successful Black friends, so this is a really difficult thing for me to see them have to deal with, because they don't know how to talk sense into these crazy white folks who are trying to tell them that they're being oppressed. So the Antichrist, man. I'm gonna make sure you guys are left with links because it's entirely too long to read through, but it's amazing, just all the parallels to. It's infectious. It sounds good on its face. Like it if you're not really paying attention to what it's telling you, you'll just kind of fall into it. And I think for a lot of people who are a little too deep into it, they probably dig their heels in when they start realizing that this isn't what I thought it was, but I can't go back now. You know, so there's this kind of weird cult element to it that's really frightening. So I feel like I've lost the question you asked. You're asking me where's this going?
Yeah, I mean, listen, man, when you say Black Lives Matter, okay, you know, here's the thing. Who doesn't agree with that?
That's the thing, right? So lowercase, Black Lives Matter. Yeah, right. Of course. Yeah. Who was ever going to argue with that?
Right.
But we have a movement that's uppercase B, you know, uppercase L, uppercase M. It might as well be, you know, an incorporated idea. It's kind of, in fact, I mean, this is sort of this is kind of the way that it gets in, right? Because it has a message that is completely sensical.
Right.
Actually, this is another great fallacy that you guys should look up that I only just learned about. It's called the Mott and Bailey fallacy. And it's real subtle. It's incredible. This is like the Mott is your fortress. And I think this refers to feudal societies, if I'm not mistaken. So you've got a fortress that's well armed and it's got a moat around it. That's your argument of, yeah, Black Lives Matter. And of course, who's going to argue with this? The Bailey was the town on the outskirts of the fortress. And that was the thing. If anything's going to be attacked, it's going to be the town. So the town retreats, you know, you can retreat to the fortress. So the Bailey, this town, that's the rest of this weird ideology that starts to go way too far when they start saying stuff like, yeah, that there's crazy systemic, that all cops are bastards and that there's crazy systemic racism that we can never fix. And that's the Bailey. So the idea is when you start to attack that, they can always go back to the fortress and say, well, but you said Black Lives Matter, you know, and that it's this weird kind of back and forth where it's able to defend itself in ways it shouldn't be able to defend itself because it's like they take a mile when you give them an inch sort of thing. You know, anyone that would argue with this.
Well, Greg, isn't it kind of like, okay, bro, we put out there Black Lives Matter. And I hear that, and here's what the logical mind is saying. Okay, I'm all on board. Of course, Black Lives Matter, yellow lives matter, white lives matter. You know, brown lives. Every life matter. I'm aboard. But then my next question is, okay, there's a Black Lives movement happening. What is it?
Yeah,
we know Black Lives Matter. We want to stand up for Black Lives Matter. In the end, what are we looking for? Are we looking for equality? Like, what I would want to know that. Bro, I'll tell you right now, Annie was in 2 protests in Denver. And I know Annie is standing behind the thought of Black Lives Matter, but I don't know if Annie is really asking the question, like, what are we protesting for? Like,
Yeah.
at what point is it proven to us that Black Lives Matter? We get rid of the police department? Like, is that how
Right.
it's proven to us? Like,
Right.
what has to happen in order for us to be victorious? And bro, I see that question being asked a lot, because I see, like, bro, the police officers are getting the severest of penalties. You know, they're in jail,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like, but they're still protesting. So like, I hear a lot of people saying, okay, but justice is being served. We want justice. That is happening. What else more do we want? And it's kind of like you said, it's like, what's on paper? Like,
Yeah.
what's on paper? So if there's no objective, then like, what is the end game?
That's why I bring up critical theory, man, because if you don't understand that this is rooted in something that is inherently nonsensical, it's a pseudoscience.
Can you compare that to something, Greg, like where this has been done before?
Yeah, God, dude, I don't know how many times humanity has to go through freedom and slavery. But this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the kind of ideology that eventually leads you to slavery, because it gets you to blame the rest of the world for things that you could probably fix. And that's how you get people under control, you know? And that's how you can get like a party that will tell you that it's going to do all these things for you as long as you give them a little bit of your freedom. And that's that's how it kind of starts. It starts slipping away. So the most recent, everyone, it's easy to make comparisons to Nazi Germany, but one of the most fascinating things that happened in Nazi Germany was that it was basically perpetrated by a lot of ordinary guys, and they were being told to blame this group and that group for the problems that you're seeing around you and why you're poor. I don't know if I talked about it last time. I don't think I would have had reason to. When the whole virus thing started, I got really concerned about the idea of the true believer. And Eric Hoffer is the author. You can find his book, The True Believer. He wrote about the kind of like the psychological profile of an average person that gets involved in these big movements. Normally, they're newly poor. That's like one of the biggest things, because they are willing to accept a message that says better things are coming. If you accept this ideology and do what we tell you to do, you'll be part of the class that gets the better shake. And it's a dastardly trick, man. It's been pulled many times. I'm not as well read in, I think, Russian Revolution, but my understanding is this is anytime you see socialist or communist, or I think the better term to me is collectivist. Anytime somebody is trying to tell you that the group is more important than the individual, they don't understand. First of all, the group is not a thing. It's an abstraction. It's an idea. Like it's made up of individuals. It's not in and of itself a real thing. You can't pick up a group of people like and hold it in your hand. Like an individual is what makes up the group. You'll end up having multiple individuals making up the group. I've also heard this put that like your body is communist insofar as that it's regulated from each according to his ability to each according to his need, so that your liver is willing to hand over resources to your heart. It might be a bad example, but your body isn't fighting itself for resources. Your organs aren't fighting itself for resources. They're willing to cooperate because they have a common goal in mind, which is to survive as a whole body. When you start trying to do this with individual people, it necessitates that they're all on the same page and that they all have the same goal in mind. And we're just too wide and varied for that. This is why we have a liberal legal system, a liberal capitalist system that is based on the idea that we're all different and that we accept that we're all different. We're trying to make, God, we've made incredible progress in 200 years, if you ask me, 250 years, however the hell long now. I don't want to get off track. I feel like you asked me something.
Well, tell me about the what was the bishop's name again?
Fulton Sheen.
Tell me about specifically, give me some specifics of what he was saying back in 1947. You
Here,
said there
man.
are some links in what I would love to
Yeah,
hear what he
here.
was talking about.
Let me pull this up here. So I believe this all starts. Actually, you know what? He's I've got him on you. Yeah, so you can actually find his radio address here. You can listen to him.
I've seen him, bro.
Yeah, bro.
I knew the name. I have without a doubt seen him. He used to give addresses on TV. I guess when he was alive.
No
Like what
kidding.
year did this guy die, bro?
Oh, when did he die? You know, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I guarantee you. Like I've seen him, bro. I have.
Yeah, read you what it says here. These are some good excerpts. The Antichrist will not be so called, otherwise you would have no followers. He will not wear red tights, nor vomit sulfur, nor carry a trident, nor wave an arrowed tail as Mephistopheles in Faust. This masquerade has helped the devil convince men that he does not exist, when no man recognizes, the more power he exercises. God has defined himself as I am who am, and the devil is I am who am not. Nowhere in sacred scripture do we find warrant for the popular myth of the devil as a buffoon who is dressed like the first red. Rather, he is described as a fallen angel from heaven, as the prince of this world, whose business it is to tell us that there is no other world. His logic is simple. If there is no heaven, there is no hell. If there is no hell, there is no sin. If there is no sin, then there is no judge. And if there is no judgment, then evil is good and good is evil. But above all these descriptions, our Lord tells us that he will be so much like himself that he would deceive even the elect. And certainly no devil ever seen in picture books could deceive even the elect. How will he come in this new age to win followers to his religion? He will come disguised as a great humanitarian. He will talk peace, prosperity, and plenty, not as a means to lead us to God, but as a means or as an ends in themselves. He will write books on the new idea of God to suit the way people live, induce faith in astrology so as to make not the will, but the stars responsible for his sins. He will explain guilt away psychologically as inhibited eroticism, make men shrink in shame if their fellow men say they are not broad-minded and liberal. He will be so broad-minded as to identify tolerance with indifference to right and wrong, truth and error. He will spread the lie that men will never be better until they make society better, and thus have selfishness to provide fuel for the next revolution. I just can't. God, it's just too spot on, dude.
I know it is 1947.
So, and this is the thing, right? Because this may be part of the issue with what we're looking for in the world. That, I mean, he's laying it out right here. That this is worldly. This is of the world. It wants to concern itself with the things that supposedly are the only things we have to worry about. And I mean, we're very much steeped in a culture that is kind of nihilistic and cynical about. I mean, especially Christianity. Nothing gets beat up more than Christianity in our culture. I mean, I've been part of that myself, growing up. And it's funny that you come to respect it more and more as you age, and you kind of see the way people choose to live their lives. And you come to realize that the Bible was put together over thousands of years, and that these stories are not just stories. There's universal truth. There's something about human truth in these stories that is, I mean, regardless of, and see, I don't want to put, I know Christianity better than other religions. I don't want to put it over as the only one, because I'm under the impression that there are many other religions that get around the same idea that you're responsible for yourself and that there is something greater than you, and that you can't get too bogged down. Oh, sorry about that. Can't get too bogged down in worldly things. And I can't think of anything more worldly than the color of your skin. And the, however you identify yourself sexually or whatever gender. And the thing is, I personally, to me, this has always been a matter of, let me get back to my face here. That, if you don't mess with me, I won't mess with you. I'm happy that you have found happiness, however you found happiness. I mean, that I don't come down on anybody for wanting to live life the way they live. I think, though, the one thing I'll come down on people for is not respecting logic and not respecting enlightenment values and not respecting the fact that if we're going to get anywhere, we have to be able to have a good faith conversation. And if you can't come back to some first principles enough to say that, you got to be able to concede a point. You got to be able to understand where the other person is coming from.
Yeah.
And have a back and forth. So again, I've read some incredible things lately based on all this stuff. Let me just get a couple of links in front of me here. There's oh man, I don't know if you got to watch the these guys, newdiscourses.com. This is a phenomenal website. This is led by at least one of 3 professors that I'm aware of. James A. Lindsay, I think is his name. If you guys haven't heard this story, in fact, you can go find this fellow, Mike Nana, on YouTube. He did a documentary on this whole grievance study affair, as they call it. To give you a short synopsis, these 3 professors are geniuses. They entered 20 academic papers that two gender studies journals and sociological journals. Some of these, I dare say, absolutely ridiculous academic fields that just are not rooted in any sort of data. They're not rooted in objective reality. They're rooted generally in these critical theories. So they write these 20 articles, 7 of them get accepted and some of them get put over, man. And they're basically just about the most ridiculous crap you can think of. One of them was about like rape culture at dog parks. And like one of them was, oh dude, I won't do it justice. Please go find Mike Nana. And there's this recommended viewing order playlist. The first thing this is going to take you through is this Evergreen College affair. And 2 years ago, this fellow Brett Weinstein and his wife Heather Haying, which they have a podcast called Dark Horse. They are phenomenal to listen to. They have been blowing the whistle on this for at least 2 years. And there are people before them who have seen the madness and have been afraid that it's actually going to infect the real world. And lo and behold, this is what we've dealt with. Brett Weinstein was just recently on Joe Rogan. It's the first thing Joe opens with. He's like, if anybody predicted this thing, it was you. So you watch this about the Evergreen Affair. I couldn't possibly get into just the madness of it, but I think you'll recognize it because you've seen it in the streets lately. So you'll see the madness. I mean, you'll see how it doesn't really allow for anything to be fixed. It's driven by rhetoric. It's driven by emotion. It's not driven by logic. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I'm writing that down, bro. Brent Weinstein and
Brett Weinstein.
Evergreen Affair. I'm writing that.
Okay. And the grievance studies, man. I'll make sure you get all these links too. Brett's brother, by the way, Eric Weinstein, also just an incredible mind. He also has a podcast called The Portal. He's a mathematician. He gets into all sorts of stuff. I just feel like I have to point him out because they have a few dialogues back and forth. I'd say Brett is a little more involved in this aspect of things. Eric is very interested in where do we go once we fix this. Like we got to know where the future is headed.
Bro, there are people going crazy on this chat room that wants to talk to you. Yeah, Richard Quinn is losing his mind. Richard Quinn keeps bringing up Greg, and maybe we do this on next show because this isn't a 5-minute conversation. Okay. He keeps bringing up Event 201. Yeah. October 2019. What if there is a worldwide pandemic? How are we going to handle ourselves? This was October 2019.
I know. Isn't that amazing?
What? Here's what's more amazing to me. Why? How is that so under the radar? Like, bro, it is out there. It is in our faces. You can go online. You can see this event. Like, I don't understand.
You can find it once you've heard of it.
Go ahead. What?
Because I'll tell you, dude, here's one of the real messed up problems we're going to have to deal with in the coming years. And I don't even know how much of this has to do with human intervention. This might be one of the things AI has done to us. Because right now, if you've got a feed of any kind, a news feed of any kind, or if you Google something, you have a customized feed. Unless you've gone to extra length, which I would please God, by the way, if you're going to look up anything critical race theory, you should check the results you get on Google and the results you get on DuckDuckGo, which is not a Google. I think it still pulls from Google servers, but it's a private. It doesn't track you. It doesn't know who you are. It doesn't try to personalize anything. You will get drastically different results. So there's this weird algorithmically driven thing in place that only puts certain news in front of you that may or may not be relevant to you. It's a computer that's doing this. It's AI that's doing this. And some people have said, like, is this maybe Skynet? This is kind of the thing that starts to drive us crazy. Is this why we can't talk to each other anymore? Because you're not actually seeing the news that's relevant to you that would actually help you make a more sound decision. And I have to say, man, because if you've heard of Event 201, you can go look for it and you can find it, but it's not going to just make its way on your page. And yeah, that is probably
Greg,
Google pulling stuff.
The media has heard about this.
Oh yeah.
Like
yeah, they have.
I mean, bro, it blows my mind that this shit is out there. So first of all, you got this shit out there that nobody's talking about. So then, well, who should be talking about? Well, the media should be talking about this, but the media isn't talking about this. Well, why isn't the media? Bro, it blows my mind that this shit is out there, but I don't get it.
Well, here's another one of the things that we're up against is that like the newspaper clearly has died. Journalism is not what it used to be. And there's a reason for that. It's because it doesn't make money the way it does. Facebook figured this out, I think, in the early days, that if they make you angry, you'll stay online longer and you'll engage with material more. You'll post more. You'll get that little dopamine hit when somebody, likes your post, and you'll be on there longer. But only, usually if you're angry about something that you've seen, you'll stay on longer. So they know that there's that little emotional manipulation to be had. Journalists, if you're going to actually go and perform a well-rounded investigation into something, you might have to spend $300,000. You might have to actually put some money down and end up with something that might not even be much of a story. It's not a good investment for a lot of these journals to actually do journalism. It's more, they get more bang for their buck if they can get as many people to read as possible, and if they can piss you off. So intersectionality is great for journalism, because if they write an article about a gay, a gay issue, then they'll get obviously gay readers. But if they write about gay black issues, they're going to get twice as many, arguably, obviously a proportional amount larger viewership. And that's what we're all about these days, man, is clicks and views. And that's where ad revenue and money is. I mean, so there is this weird way that capitalism's kind of screwing us over right now. And the people that know this take advantage of it constantly. Yeah.
Greg, let me ask you this then. Let's wrap this up, because you have to wrap this up with some advice. Okay. We hear Black Lives Matter. Great. Yeah. Well, I agree. Where do I sign up? Black Lives Matter. But then, bro, we see the protesting. And we're never really hearing like what is the end game? What is the goal? What do we want to get out of Black Lives Matter? Okay, that black people are equal to white people. Okay, well, what does that mean to you? Like you said, there's a lot of individuals involved. So what does that mean as a group? Where is the equality? Does that mean there's no longer a police department? But now here's the tricky part. Once you start asking the questions, you're a racist. Right. You see what I'm saying? Once you don't fall in line without asking any intelligent questions, you're a racist. And bro, that's the last thing anybody wants to be called when they're not. Right. So like, Greg, what do you do? I mean, if you want to, I want to join the cause. I want more information. What is the goal? What do they call it when you start a company? What do you do? The mission statement. What is the mission statement? I just want to know that stuff so I can make a decision. Am I on board or not? Once you start asking the questions, bro, that's when the labels come. So what do you do, Greg?
You have to first understand that there is no answer to this question. So you're asking somebody that's not going to be able to answer that question. So I don't even know if that's the thing to get into, frankly. I think, God, the best advice I've heard on this, actually, let me point you to my Parler page right now, because I've got a lot of this stuff. Yeah, no, I wanted to tell you guys this. If anyone wants to come yell at me.
What is that, bro? Parler?
Parler. In fact, it's in French, they'd say parlay, but I believe that they're calling it Parler.
And what is it, .com, bro?
Yeah, parler.com.
Okay.
You'll find me at Fighting CRT, and my name is In the Wake of the Woke. And you'll find my feed has a lot of these relevant videos. Peter Bogosian is one of the 3 professors I mentioned for the Grievance Studies Affair. He has an incredible video about Rappaport's rules, which I had only just heard of, and you'll see them listed here. And it's incredible advice, because this is coming from a guy who has studied way more of this than he should for his own mental health. God bless him. And what he's telling you is, as I'm telling you, there is no answer to the question that you want. Because this is not something that's rooted in objective reality. So it doesn't actually look for real things to fix. It just seeks to overthrow what exists. So if you're talking to somebody that thinks they believe in this is how he says you compose a successful critical commentary. And these are Rappaport's rules. I think Daniel Dennett was one of the other guys that worked with Rappaport. They're philosophers, I believe. Number 1, always attempt to re-express your target's position so clearly, vividly, and fairly that your target says, thanks, I wish I thought of putting it that way. You have to show you're listening first. And this is when I first start the show out, this is what I tell you, is coming from a place of compassion will dictate this for you. Try to see that this is somebody who has not gotten the whole story. We're all kind of getting screwed over by the fact that we're not getting enough information, and there are people taking advantage of the fact that we're not getting enough information. So have compassion first and foremost, and try to restate whatever point it is that they want to make to you. Try to restate it to them so that they know that you've listened, that you've understood. Number 2, you should list any points of agreement. And as I said before, I don't disagree that there's some things that clearly look like, my favorite example is driving while black. I don't know what drives that. That might be a police culture thing. Dude, I can talk at length about police culture because we'll have to do an episode on this, but there's a lot that can change with police policy. And there's some really good ideas out there about how to do that in a very constructive manner, because they have some things, some of the methodologies and the chokeholds and shit like that, they're bad ideas. They clearly don't work. They're ill-informed. They're not medically sound. There's so much we can be doing to fix that kind of thing. And those are the things that cause problems. Number 3, you should only mention anything. You should mention anything you may have learned from your target. And that could be any number of things. And again, there's some validity to lived experience. So it's really difficult to listen to somebody tell you that they themselves have experienced racism and then try to tell them it doesn't exist. I mean, you can't, it doesn't do them any credit. You really do want, again, as far as compassion goes, this might be somebody who really thinks that sweeping change needs to happen because something awful has happened to themselves or one of their loved ones. So really it's important, I think, insofar as that is concerned, to listen. And then number 4, only then are you permitted to say so much as a word of rebuttal or criticism. So really, this is just about establishing that you've listened, that you understand where they're coming from. And then I think the question from there, I mean, depending on who it is you're talking to, exactly what you're getting around. I'm fond of trying to use a system of logic that I want to use it against them. Whatever they're trying to tell me is their way of thinking. I want to try to find the way to say, for instance, I mean, this whole critical theory thing is so anti-science in terms of its willingness to look at data and say that, here's some objective truths about the world, or here's some things we can interpret. It's so anti-science that it makes no sense for these people to be for climate change. That in and of itself, climate change is, if we're going to get into that, if you're going to get into data and the interpretation of data and where that data came from and what might be done in order to counter the things that we've figured out, that's all science. That's logic. That's Enlightenment values. That's classical. That's not postmodern. So you have to start to find the cognitive dissonance, the little things that don't add up. Like that, if you're going to believe this, then it would stand to reason that this might be the case. So, I mean, one of my things is I don't know what we're supposed to do about the fact that we have a lot of mixed race people. My children are going to be mixed race. I mean, this is going to be, I don't like the idea that this is even something I have to talk to them about. This is the thing we tried to move beyond. This is Martin Luther King. I mean, very Christian man telling us that this is about the content of your character, not the color of your skin. So there are these subtleties all over the world. Native Americans, if we're going to talk about reparations to anybody, what about, are you going to tell an old Jewish guy that he's got to pay reparations, man? There's just some of these things that I don't know if they're thinking through it. So again, there's ways to be compassionate about this. I've seen it, this is called a good faith argument. And I the hope is that you don't get somebody that's just going to be screaming in your face about something.
Yeah. And usually if they don't have the answers, that's what they do.
Yeah. And that's the problem. So that's the problem with even asking for an answer, because they're not going to have it. They're emoting. And frankly, dude, this is the thing, even with this lockdown and the fact this has all happened the way that it has happened, you've got a bunch of pissed off people who are just generally pissed off because if you've been paying attention to any form of media in the past 6 months, and you have been lied to at least once, and so you've either accepted that, and I guess you just deal with the dissonance of it, or you haven't accepted it and you're mad and you don't really know why, because you don't want to think that you're just being lied to by the powers that be. But we all know, I'm certain your audience is familiar. Again, kayfabe, man. These guys know what's going on.
Yeah. Yusef, somebody in here named Yusef asked me if my nephew, Greg, will take questions. He'd be happy to, bro. So Yusef, if you have a question, give me a question. Anybody that has a question for Greg, he will gladly answer your question. Just feed it up here and I will ask him. God, Greg, there's so many things going on and so many things to talk about.
I know, man.
You could be on here nonstop,
I know. It's hard to get like a nice digestible piece of something in it, like an hour or two. Yeah. But man, one of the greatest things, you're taking part in one of the greatest pieces of technology we have right now, which is this. I think a lot more people are interested in long form podcasts than we thought would be possible. There are plenty of people willing to sit and listen for an hour or 3 hours to presentations on really esoteric ideas.
What's weird about that? But there are people that don't, bro. Like, which is really weird to me. I mean, Greg, like my TV consists of, I get my little remote control and I say 2 words: YouTube. That's it. Yeah. And then it brings it up and I'll go here. Amy can't stand that. Like, and I'm like, I need to know what the frig, like, I know. But it's weird to me, bro. Like, some people just out of sight, out of mind. We don't want to know. Hey, hold on. Oh my gosh, bro. This Richard Quinn, like he's got so many things here. The flag was sewn at 239 Art Street in Philly. Trump shares the flag's birthday on purpose. Trump took office when the flag was 239 years old. He attacked the NFL on kneeling on September 23rd.
What?
I
got to look into that. That sounds interesting.
Richard Quinn has a lot. He's been talking through this whole thing.
Wow.
The 2 teams in the Super Bowl was the 2 flag teams. I'm not sure what he knows by that. Bro, people want to know if they could email you. Can they email you? They have questions, bro.
Yeah. So you saw over here my parlor thing, In the Wake of the Woke. So you can get In the Wake of the Woke at gmail.com.
And that's where they write to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Bro, it's old news. It kind of is old news, but I think we need to start with this when we talk next time, because here's what I really want to talk about. We got to talk about this event 201. Because that's everything went downhill from there. We also have to talk about Bill Gates, bro.
Oh my God.
I think we need to start kind of at the root of all this before there was a COVID. Because, bro, when you look at it, like you said, Greg, like you said, bro, being locked up inside your house 2, 3, 4 months, there were people bursting at the seams to just get out and go crazy. And what a perfect time for protesting. So it's kind of like, does one thing logically lead into the next? But I think you have to start at the beginning, or is there a better place to start, Greg?
I mean, what are we talking about? Like world domination? Like that clearly this is something that is a long-standing narrative that
where we are right now at this point in time.
I think, the term New World Order, right? Not the NWO, of course.
Right.
We're talking about like David Rockefeller and going back. Okay, Fabian socialism, that might be a thing to start looking into. And God, man, that's a big topic. But Emperor Fabius.
And hold on for a second. Let me just address Richard Quinn.
Yeah.
Richard says the narrative about the flag. See how we didn't get it. No offense. No, Richard, it's not that I didn't get your narrative about.
We just got to look at it. I don't even remember who was in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, these comments are scrolling quickly, and I'm trying to pay attention to Greg. So it's not that I didn't get it. I didn't have the time to dive into it because I'm trying to have a conversation with Greg. But Greg,
anything you guys want to email, please.
Yeah, email. Yeah, please do. Greg, so are you talking about the NWO?
Yeah. So the idea that somehow we're supposed to move into this next big phase. And I don't know if you guys have heard of the Great Reset at the World Economic Forum next year. And that's what they're calling it, is the Great Reset, as though it's something they're planning.
And they have actually used the New World Order, right? Like,
dude, Reagan has talked about it.
Right.
Woodrow Wilson's talked. Yeah. It's not a secret. Yeah. Bush Sr. was into it.
Greg, Richard Quinn is asking for your email again. You're going to be tied up with Richard Quinn for the next 3 weeks.
That's all right. Richard, I'm happy to hear from him.
Listen up. It's on Parler. The Parler is
no.
Oh, go ahead.
You can find me on Parler. That's like a Twitter thing, but you can also you can email me at inthewakeofthewoke@gmail.com. It's just the same name
of the woke at gmail.com. There you go, bro.
Yeah.
So
I'd love to hear from you.
Where do we start, bro? What are we talking about next week?
Oh, man. You know what? Honestly, a really good source for some of this stuff. There's a great book by, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of John Taylor Gatto. He was New York City's Teacher of the Year in the early 90s, I think. He's since died. God bless him. He's a great mind. He has a book called The Underground History of American Education. Among others, there's one called Dumbing Us Down, one called Weapons of Mass Instruction. He's phenomenal. So as a teacher, he got to see a lot of how schools were starting to go south. And he came from an old enough tradition to have seen what learning is actually supposed to look like. And his book, The Underground History of American Education, I have reread, and it's worth its weight in gold. You can also find on YouTube, he did a series
History of American Education, Greg.
Yes.
And what's his name again?
John Taylor Gatto, Gatto. It's a Paisan. He also, let me pull it up because he's got also I
wrote it down.
Okay, The Ultimate History Lesson on YouTube. It's like a 5-hour deal. Again, I've watched this so many times. Richard Grove and I think his company, his name was Tragedy and Hope, which is another great book by Carol Quigley that talks about the New World Order and talks very much about how the funding of World War II went, that World War II was funded from both sides. It's incredible, dude. And Carol Quigley is no small time. He's a heavy hitter historian from, I think he was Bill Clinton's mentor, Carol Quigley. Yeah. So that Tragedy and Hope, anyway, was a book, but this guy, Richard Grove, named his little company after that. And he did this whole series with John Taylor Gatto. Let me pull this up. The Ultimate History Lesson. So I think this, it looks like there's a playlist with just all 5 hours, but then you can go through them individually. He's an amazing thinker.
Jack Hadrich wants to know, have you ever read the James Billington book, Fire in the Minds of Men?
It's on my shelf, man. It's honestly, and at the end of Underground History of American Education is a book list that Gatto recommends. I think I have most of them.
Jack has read that, I think, bro.
Very nice. I got to get into it. I haven't yet. I think I've read some in a similar vein, but I'm also not quite remembering exactly what the content was supposed to be.
Richard Quinn is saying the 1940 New York Times says New World Order is pledged to Jews. Look it up.
Interesting. I will look it up.
Wow, Greg. I bring your face back up here, Greg.
Oh, yeah. Let me get up there.
Greg, you give us a lot to think about, man.
Hey, man, I'm glad. It's just, it gets it off my mind. Well,
Greg, do you think everything now, because you're going back, bro. You're going back to the 40s and way before then, and this has been going on for a long time. Bro, do you think for some reason the agenda has been sped up, or is it that we're just exposed to more with media today?
It might be that enough of the technology that has allowed this to take place is in place. Because one of the biggest things is that there's this division in the information that we're all getting and able to talk about. That seems like it was only recently achievable. which is weird because the internet, you would figure, is this bastion of information. You've got everything out there. But they said this about the Gutenberg press, right? As soon as you could print books, yeah, that's incredibly powerful, but that also means you can peddle bullshit just as easily.
Yeah.
So the internet has just gotten progressively worse. And the fact that there's so many business interests involved now, you're going to see things that are going to be removed because, you know, if something's funded by GE and they don't want you to see it, they're going to, you know, pull some strings, get that thing removed.
Bro, whatever happened to the simple Paul is dead gimmick, bro? Whatever happened to that? Very simple, bro.
You know, Billy Shears might have been in on this shit, dude.
Billy Shears, bro.
We got to get into Tavistock. Because that's the thing, dude. When you're pushing counterculture, because this is you're talking about how long this has been going on. Counterculture was the beginning of this kind of free love idea. And again, like on their face, it's hard to say. Like, I don't want to come from the place of like these are demonic ideas. It's just look at the kind of moral bankruptcy that comes from polygamy. You know, that's a good example. I know a lot of polyamorous couples these days, or they're at least ones that try to be. And that's the big joke, is none of them are responsible enough. None of them are smart enough in and of themselves to be able to actually love multiple people at once. It's kind of not the way we're built evolutionarily. It kind of doesn't work. If you're going to make it work, you got to be smart. You got to be really clever about how you balance those things. It's just, it doesn't work. There's a lot of moral bankruptcy around people that end up in stuff like that. I hate to say, you know, so counterculture was, you know, there's a lot of stuff that started there. And if you're going to consider the fact that the CIA was behind a lot of these bands and pushing a lot of this narrative, one of the guys you'll see in interviewing John Gatto is this guy, Jan Irvin. And I think his website is still up. He used to be on gnosticmedia.com. I think he's changed the name lately, but he's done a ton of research in this field. And he used to talk a lot about, I'm not going to remember the guy's name. He used to talk a lot about the magic mushroom, the psychedelic mushroom, as it relates to, honestly, to the early days of Christianity and to the counterculture, because there's, as with Albert Hoffman, the guy that discovered LSD, there's kind of the popular story about how he discovered it, and then there's this is something that they clearly, you know, I think LSD was synthesized from a wheat fungus, and it may or may not have been responsible for a lot of you know, could have been responsible for the Salem witch trials and people like having mass hallucinations because they were eating moldy bread basically, and it was making them lose their minds. So there's a lot of stuff, man. We've known that there are substances like that. They did a lot. You know, this is what MK Ultra and Project Mockingbird and Project Monarch are all about. We're testing these substances and seeing, you know, if it was possible to create a Manchurian candidate.
They talk about Ben talks about Project Mockingbird all the time.
Yes,
all the time.
I think we're dealing with some of that right now too, because there's the level of propaganda that we're dealing with right now is just unheard of, man. There used to be laws against it. And if I'm not mistaken, under the Obama administration, there was a repeal that allowed for some of these things. It's kind of like it was something to do with basically like using propaganda on your own population.
Hold on, bro. They're asking me to put your email in the chat room so they can write it down. So, Greg, let me write that down. Hold on. Yeah. Tell me what it is again, bro.
In the wake of the woke.
In the wake of the woke. Go ahead.
At gmail.com.
In the wake of the woke at gmail.com. There you guys. Man, you're going to get bombarded now, bro.
That's great. I'll be happy to see what you guys have to say.
Yeah, in the wake of the woke. All right, guys, there you have it. Greg, let's pick this up, man, next week. I mean,
absolutely,
my gosh,
man. I'd be happy to.
I mean, and whatever you think is pertinent, whatever you think, because, bro, every day it's changing out there. Every day. So to bring up now what we're going to discuss next week, who knows what's going to be going on next week?
Yeah, I know. Who knows, man? I'm sure it'll be somewhat related.
Ask questions, right? I mean, ask questions at the end of the day.
Ask questions and don't give up your convictions. Don't be a coward. Like, know what you stand for. Have principle enough to say, now, because there's a way to be compassionate and not bend the knee. And that's what we got to find, is that place that says, look, I see where you're coming from, but you have to try to see where I'm coming from and understand that I can't get behind what you're talking about because it doesn't seem to lead to anything meaningful.
Right.
And you have to be able to find that balance, because we cannot continue to kowtow to this thing.
You know, bro, we talk
That's
about
gotta
all
be the
that. I talk about that all the time on my shows.
Yeah,
Who's
amen.
apologizing? Who's sorry for
Yes.
stuff from 40 years ago? And
Don't apologize. You don't apologize for these things. I really believe that. If there's something you really think you need to apologize for, your intuition will tell you that.
Yeah, that's
And,
right.
and you know, that's where I stand with that.
Yeah. All right, guys, there you have it. The great, the brilliant. None of his brilliancy rubbed off on me, though. The brilliant Greg Miller. Guys, please write to Greg.
Please.
What is it? Awoke?
In the wake of the woke.
In the wake of the woke at gmail.com.
Yeah, and listen, if you're on Twitter, get the fuck off of Twitter and come on to Parler. Because Twitter is just a cesspool. Parler is free speech, baby.
I'm going to check
people
that
of
out.
all ilks.
But remember, it's with an E, guys. PARLER.com.
Yes.
So, bro, you just sign up and you're on there.
Yeah, that's it. That's all.
I'm going to do
So
that
simple.
today, Greg. I'm going to do
it,
that
man.
today based on your recommendation.
Brilliant. Hope to see you on there.
All right, guys, there you have it. The great Greg. We will see you next week. Greg, thank you so much
right, man.
for the enlightenment, bro.
You got it, man. I'll see you guys next week.
All right.